They called her my pet. Kale's tail froze. My fists clenched because if I spoke, we'd both be cast out, forced to play along as master and pet. Their bond is tested like never before. This is part 4 of their journey. If you haven't yet, you can catch the first 3 stories in the playlist linked below. The desert gave us nothing but heat, sand, and silence until the village rose out of the dunes. Stone huts, weathered faces, and eyes that judged before they welcomed. They saw me as a soldier who could pull his weight. They saw Kale as something else, not a partner, not a person, just an animal at my side. And though she laughed it off, I could see the stiffness in her tail, the hurt in her eyes. In a land where survival demands obedience, what would it cost us to bite our tongues? The med tent smelled of dust and herbs, the air heavy with smoke curling from clay braziers. Darius lay propped against rough spun blankets, skin still pale from the desert sun. Outside, voices murmured in a language not his own, clicks and hisses layered with a low guttural hum. The desert people. The flap lifted. Kale slipped inside, ears twitching, tail brushing against the fabric as she let it fall shut. She carried a clay bowl, steam rising from a thin broth that smelled faintly of roots and bitter spice. They think it will help, she said, setting it by his side. Darius forced himself upright, grimacing. And you? Do you think it will? Kale's mouth curved. If it doesn't, at least you'll die with terrible taste on your tongue. That earned the faintest grunt of laughter from him. But his eyes narrowed past her shoulder toward the murmur of voices outside. What are they saying? Her ears dipped, tail flicking once. Not words you'd like. He waited. She hesitated, then crouched close, lowering her voice. When they dragged us here, you were still gone. I woke first. They spoke to me as though I couldn't understand. Her claws flexed against the floor mat. They thought I was your beast, your pet. They only saved me because they thought I belonged to you. Darius's jaw clenched, fists knotting in the blankets. Damn them. Kale's tail brushed his arm tight, restraining. Don't. Not here. Not yet. From outside came a burst of laughter, harsh alien. The flaps shifted as one of the desert folk passed. Tall, ash-skinned, their face hidden beneath layered veils. Only 4 black eyes glinting through. They didn't look inside. To them, Kale wasn't worth looking at. Darius muttered low. They'll choke on those words if they speak them to my face. Kale tilted her head, golden eyes catching the lamplight. And then we'll be out in the sand again. You're not healed enough to fight the desert twice. Silence stretched. At last, Darius exhaled through his teeth, leaning back. Kale smirked faintly, though her tail was stiff as iron. If it soothes your pride, soldier boy, I'd make a poor pet anyway. Too much bite. Darius looked at her then, steady. They'll call you what they want. I know what you are. Her ears twitched at that, and the stiffness in her tail eased just a little. The desert village was no more than a scatter of stone and hide shelters pressed against the curve of a sandstone ridge. Wind, carved grooves across the walls, banners of woven reed clattering above door frames. Life here was survival shaped into ritual. Every bucket of water hauled from the well, every strip of dried flesh hung to cure, a ceremony of necessity. The people were as harsh as their land. Tall, thin-limbed, their skin ash-gray and cracked like dried clay. Each wore layers of veils and cloth that left only their 4 black eyes uncovered. They moved slow, deliberate, conserving strength with every step. When Darius emerged from the med tent with Kale at his side, those eyes turned. The air shifted, a hush beneath the whisper of grit. One villager stepped forward, a woman by the cut of her robes. She offered Darius a water skin, bowing her head with solemn respect. Then, almost as an afterthought, she tossed the second skin toward Kale. It landed at her feet like a bone thrown to a hound. Kale's tail twitched. Her ears dipped. She said nothing. Darius bent, picked up the skin, and pressed it back into Kale's hands with deliberate care. His eyes flicked toward the woman, hard as steel. She drinks first. The woman's gaze lingered, alien and unreadable. Then she bowed again to him, not to Kale, and withdrew. They moved deeper into the settlement. Everywhere the same. Hands clasped Darius's shoulder. Voices rasped blessings. Nods of approval followed his steps. For Kale, there were stares, mutters, the faint curl of disdain. A child pointed at her tail and laughed until his mother hushed him. Later in the shelter they'd been given, a low-roofed hut of stone and hide. Kale uncoiled her tail with slow precision, claws drumming the packed floor. "You see it now," she said. Darius dropped onto the blanket roll, jaw set. "I saw enough outside the tent. They treat you like an animal." Her voice cut sharp, though her smile was faint and bitter. "Told you already." His hands curled into fists. "And you let them?" Kaz flicked back, irritation sparking. "What would you have me do, soldier boy? Bite every hand that throws me water. We'd be back in the sand before nightfall." Darius muttered low, anger roughening his words. "Better sand than this." She crossed the space in a stride, crouching before him, her golden eyes level with his. "No, you nearly died out there. You think I'll let your pride drag us back into the dunes? Bite your tongue." The words hung sharp between them. For a long moment, only the wind moved, rattling the hut walls. Then Kale's tail flicked, brushing across his knee. Her smirk returned, forced but familiar. "Besides, if I'm your pet, shouldn't you be the one feeding me scraps?" Darius exhaled, shaking his head despite himself. "You'd steal them all anyway." Her grin sharpened. "Exactly." But when she turned away, the tip of her tail dragged slower than usual, betraying the weight beneath her words. The desert village lived by rhythm. Every morning before the sun climbed high, its people gathered at the central well, hauling water by rope and pulley, passing clay jars hand to hand, filling troughs that glimmered like liquid gold in the dawn light. Their movements were slow but exact. No drop wasted, no effort spared. Survival here was a discipline, not a luxury. Darius was brought to the well with little ceremony, pressed among the workers as though his broad shoulders had already been judged worthy of the task. A clay veil wearer clapped his arm once, approving, and pointed him toward the rope. The soldier tightened his grip on the thick braid of fibers, muscles straining as he pulled the bucket up from the deep throat of the well. He had labored before, fields, barracks, battlefields, but here every gesture carried weight. The people of sand measured strength in water drawn, and for once his power earned him nods of respect. Cal followed. She kept close, tail flicking at the dust, watching him work. The villagers watched too, their four black eyes narrowing as the fox girl stepped into the ring of labor. When she reached for a jar, intent on joining the chain of hands, a sharp hiss broke the rhythm. "Back!" One of the desert folk snapped, his voice rasping like sandpaper. "The beast has no place here." Kale's ears angled forward, confused. "I was only trying." The hiss grew harsher, echoed by others. "She reaches for water. She would steal." Her tail lashed red for bristling. "Steal? I was helping. Your arms are not the only ones that can carry." The well grew silent. Buckets hung mid-pull, jars suspended between hands. Dozens of black eyes fixed on her, unblinking, heavy as the desert sun. Darius dropped the rope, fury written across his face. "You really think she's here to steal?" His voice rang against the stone walls. "You think so little of her that work looks like theft?" The desert folk drew back, not cowed but coiled like serpents beneath rock. An Eller's voice rose dry and final. "Control your beasts, or we will drive you both into the sand." The silence after was deeper than before. Kala's pressed low. Darius's fists clenched, shoulders broadening, his voice a low growl. "She is not." A hand touched his arm. Kale's touch light, quick but steady. Her tail brushed his leg, anchoring him. She leaned close, golden eyes fierce but quiet, and whispered where only he could hear. "It's okay, soldier boy. This isn't a fight we want right now." For a moment, his breath heaved, chest rising and falling like the bellows of a forge. He wanted to roar, to tear through their ignorance with words or fists, but her touch stilled him. The villagers waited. Dozens of veiled faces turned, patience thinning into threat. Darius drew in a sharp breath, then bowed. A short, rigid bend at the waist, the kind he had seen the villagers offer each other as a token of respect. His grimace made the motion sour, but it was enough. The desert people murmured approval, the elder lowering his hand in acceptance. Darius turned, his jaw tight, words breaking like stone in his mouth. He looked at Kale, and the command came out bitter, unnatural. Go to the tent. Wait for me." For a heartbeat, she blinked at him. Then her smirk returned, sly and sharp, despite the weight pressing between them. She bowed, imitating the desert people with exaggerated grace. "As you wish." Her eyes met his as she straightened, and her lips shaped silent words he could read as clear as speech. "It's okay. The knot in his chest wrenched tighter. He wanted to take the words back to spit in the dust and drag her away. Instead, he watched as Kale turned, tail flicking, and walked from the circle. The villagers shifted back to their rhythm, water flowing from hand to hand, as if the moment had never happened. But for Darius, each pull on the rope was heavier than the last. And in the tent where Kale waited, every heartbeat echoed louder than the desert wind. By the time the sun slid low and the last of the jars were stacked, Darius's hands were raw from the rope. His arms ached, but it was nothing compared to the weight grinding in his chest. Every bow, every approving nod from the villagers had been tainted, earned at Kale's expense. He pushed through the narrow alleys of the stone huts, the smell of smoke and drying hides clinging to the air. His jaw locked tighter with each step. By the time he reached their tent, the flaps swayed in the hot wind, and he shoved inside with a force that rattled the frame. Kale was already there, sitting cross-legged on the woven mat. Her tail curled close. Her ears perked at his entrance. She opened her mouth to speak, but his glare stopped her. "They called you a beast. They made me." His words broke sharp. "They made me tell you to heal. And you want me to play along with that?" Kale's smile was thin, dangerous. "I told you it's better than the desert." "I don't care about the desert," he barked. "I care about them spitting on you like you're nothing." Hers flicked back, tail thumping once against the mat. "And what do you think happens if you roar at them every time, soldier boy? You think they'll change their minds because your voice is louder? They will respect you. They won't." Her voice cracked like a whip, rising sharper than he'd ever heard it. She stood in one fluid motion, tail bristling. "Would you rather we die in the sand, soldier boy? How about we go down guns blazing in this cursed village in the middle of nowhere?" The venom in her tone startled him, silencing his next words. He had seen her fierce, seen her reckless, but this was different. Raw, sharp, meant to wound him before the desert could. His anger broke, leaving only the ache beneath. Slowly, he reached out, fingers closing around her arm. She had turned away, shoulders stiff, but he held her with care, not force. Her ears drooped slightly as she muttered, voice low and rough. "You know this is hard for me too, right? To bite my tongue. How can I bite yours too?" Darius's grip tightened, steady, grounding. He drew her close until her tension bled into his chest. "You're right," he said softly, words stripped of anger. "I'll get us both killed if I keep this up." Her head tilted, not looking at him, but her tail's twitch slowed. "I don't see you the way they do," he whispered. "Not ever. Not for a heartbeat." Finally, Kale exhaled long and tired, her ears lowering. She nodded once, silent but sure. They stayed like that, locked in the quiet hum of the desert wind until the fire and the air cooled. Then, as if snapping the thread of tension herself, Kale shifted back. She glanced at him, lips quirking. "So, should your good pet curl up at your feet now, or wait until bedtime?" Darius froze, dumbstruck, before his face broke into disbelief. "You're impossible." Her grin widened. "You mean adorable?" He huffed, laughter breaking past the weight in his chest. "You're such a pain sometimes." Her tail brushed against his leg, playful again. Sometimes for the first time that day, the heaviness in the tent eased, softened by the crooked warmth only she could drag out of him. Morning broke pale and sharp, the desert winds already stirring dust before the sun reached its peak. The villagers gathered again at the well, their veils drawn tight, their voices hushed as they moved in ritual rhythm. Darius walked among them, his steps heavy, but measured. Kale lingered nearby, not too close, not too far, close enough that her shadow trailed his, but not so close as to draw every eye. The tension clung like heat. When the rope creaked under his hands and the bucket rose, a villager reached to steady it, murmuring something approving in their rasping tongue. Then, without pause, his gaze slid to Kale. A hiss slipped between his teeth, followed by words low but sharp enough to cut. "Keep the beast back." She prowled too near the water. The jar slipped from Darius's fingers, nearly shattering on the stones. His head snapped toward the voice, fury flashing behind his eyes. His mouth opened. Kale could almost hear the curse, the roar, the threat rising in his throat. But then he froze. Her golden eyes caught his. A small flick of her tail, the faintest tilt of her ears, reminders of the night before. "Would you rather we die in the desert?" Darius's jaw worked, muscles straining. His fists trembled at his sides. But the words he wanted to throw like knives never left his tongue. He swallowed them whole, choking down fire until only smoke lingered. Slowly, deliberately, he bowed. A short dip at the waist, stiff but respectful. "The beast will stay where I put her," he said evenly, the words tasting like ash. The villagers studied him, black eyes narrowing before giving a shallow nod. The rhythm of labor resumed, water flowing hand to hand. Kale stood still, tail curled tight, watching him. She saw the struggle in his shoulders, the war he fought just to bow instead of break. When his eyes met hers again, she smirked, soft, private, a flicker of pride. Later, when the work was done and they slipped away to the shade of their tent, Kale leaned close, voice low and teasing. "Not bad, soldier boy. Didn't even bite anyone this time." Darius exhaled hard. Half a laugh, half a growl. "Don't push your luck." Her grin widened, ears tilting in amusement. "Oh, I will." And though the weight of silence still pressed heavy on him, there was strength in it now. Strength that wasn't his fists, but the choice he made to hold them. The desert night came alive with sound. Not music, not chatter, but the constant hush of wind pulling over the dunes, rattling the reeds that patched their shelter. The fire in their brazier had burned low, painting Kale's fur in shades of ember red and gold. She sprawled lazily on the woven mat, tail flicking across the floor with restless energy. Darius sat with his back against the tent's frame, watching the flame gutter. His arms still ached from hauling rope, his throat dry from swallowing down anger. Kale rolled onto her side, chin in her palm, eyes glimmering in the low light. "You know," she began, voice laced with mischief. "Your pet needs attention." Darius turned his head slowly, one brow rising. "Pet, huh?" Her grin widened, fangs flashing. "Yes, neglected, forgotten. Perthing might wander off into the desert and get eaten." She sighed dramatically, her tail draping across his knee. "Unless her master remembers to scratch her ears." He snorted. "You're unbelievable." With a sudden move, he shoved her side. Kale yelped, the sound turning into a squeal of delight as she rolled across the mat. Her tail whipped, and before she could spring back at him, his arms caught her, hauling her up. "Darius," she squeaked, half laughing, half protesting as he lifted her easily. "Your pet needs attention." He mocked, carrying her as though she weighed nothing. "You sound like a spoiled kitten." She wriggled in his grip, tail thrashing wildly. "Fox. Soldier boy, not a cat." He grinned, holding her tighter as she kicked playfully. "Kitten, pup, brat." Her ears flattened in exaggerated outrage. "Take that back." He dropped onto the mat with her still in his arms, and they tumbled into a heap, her laughter muffled against his chest. She tried to nip at his shoulder, mock growls between giggles, but he only held her closer, his teasing relentless. Finally, breathless and laughing, she stilled. Her golden eyes caught his, bright even in the dim firelight. The smirk softened, her claws resting lightly against his arm. He felt her heartbeat quick through her chest, the same rhythm fewing in his own. "Careful," she murmured, voice low now. "I might get too comfortable." Darius let his forehead rest against hers, his voice a quiet rumble. "Good, stay comfortable." Her tail curled around his waist, tugging him closer until their bodies fit together like the dunes against the wind. The desert outside was harsh, cruel, unforgiving. But in that tent, wrapped in each other's arms, warmth bloomed brighter than any fire. For a long while they lay tangled, laughter spent, silence turned soft and safe. The day had been long, the air hotter than coals. By the time the last of the buckets had been stowed, the jars sealed, the villagers gathered in the circle at the heart of the settlement. It was their way. Ritual at sunset, judgment under the shadow of the dunes. Tonight Darius and Kale were at the center. The elder came forward. His veil was heavier than the others. His frame stooped, but commanding, for black eyes gleamed like polished stone beneath the layered cloth. His voice carried the rasp of ears, slow and deliberate as the shifting sand. "In this place all in their keep," he began. His words were met with the low murmurs of the crowd. "The water does not flow for the idle. The shelter does not shield the unworthy. Beasts remain because they serve their masters, and through them the tribe." His eyes sharp and dark, fixed on Kale. She stood at Darius's side, tail coiled low, her ears pricked but unmoving. "But if this one is not beast," the elder continued, his tone heavy, "then she will be judged as the people are judged, by labor, by offering. And I see not her worth." The circle shifted, cloth rustling, veiled heads nodding. Kale's claws tapped against her thigh once, slow and restrained. Her tail twitched. Darius stepped forward, heat rising through his chest. She saved my life. His voice was gravel, rough but steady. She pulled me from the dunes when I would have bled out. You drink today because she carried me here. The elder did not flinch. A beast may save its master. A beast may bite or bear weight. A beast has purpose if its master gives it. The circle was tied around them. Torches planted in the sand casting long shadows against the stone. The elder stood unmoving for eyes fixed on Kale, voice as dry as the desert wind. If she is beast, he said, pins to your will. The villagers murmured, cloth rustling as they leaned forward, eager to witness. Darius's throat tightened. His hands curled into fists. He glanced at Kale. Her golden eyes flared, tail twitching once before settling, and though her face was calm, the faintest tilt of her ears told him what only he could see. This cut her deep, but she nodded subtle, giving him permission. Darius swallowed hard. The words burned his tongue. Kale, he said, voice low, heavy. Sit. Her smirk flickered, razor thin. Pride and fury bound together. She held the silence for a breath too long, making the villagers murmur uneasily. Then, with deliberate grace, she lowered herself to the ground. Her tail curled around her legs, her chin lifted, defiant even in obedience. The crowd hissed approval, voices rising. But when Darius looked back to the elder, the man's expression had not changed. Suspicion lingered, sharp and watchful. Darius felt his chest knot. One command was not enough. He had to give them more. He drew in a breath, reached for his water skin, and hurled it several paces across the sand. It landed with a dull thud. Kale, he said again, his voice louder this time, cutting to silence. Fetch. Kale did not move at first. To the villagers, she appeared calm, obediently waiting, but Darius saw the fire in her eyes, the fury coiled tight in her chest. He almost broke, almost told her not to, but she moved. She rose smooth and slow, tail dragging across the sand. She crossed the circle, bent, and picked up the water skin. When she returned, she lowered herself to her knees before him, offering it up with both hands, golden eyes locked on his. For a heartbeat, there was only the sound of the wind. Darius forced his expression into something steady, hiding the storm beneath his ribs. He reached for the water skin, fingers brushing hers, then turned to the elder. See, his voice was Horsero, but carried strength. She serves me. I haul water as I do because when I rest, she tends me, heals me, makes sure I rise again to work another day. Without her, I would already be bones in the sand. The elder studied them in silence for eyes unreadable. The murmurs of the villagers quieted until only the hiss of wind filled the circle. Finally, the elder inclined his head once. I see the beast's value, he rasped. It serves you well. You may stay as long as you continue to haul water as you do. The tension broke with murmured approval. The circle dissolved, villagers returning to their huts and fires. The judgment finished. Darius stood rigid, water skin in hand, Kale still kneeling before him. To the villagers, it was proof of obedience. But when her tail curled slightly around his ankle, unseen by the crowd, he knew she had given him far more than proof. She had given him her strength when his own was failing. The desert night pressed thick over the settlement, the wind carrying fine grains of sand through every crack in the stone huts. Darius pulled back the flap of their tent and let Kale stalk inside first, her tail bristling like a banner of war. The moment the flap closed, her voice erupted raw and sharp. Curse this place, she spat, claws dragging across the woven mat. Sandblind fools, every last one of them. When we leave, I swear I'll burn this pit to the ground and salt the ashes. Her tail lashed, knocking over the empty brazier with a metallic clang. She bared her teeth, fangs glinting in the dim light. For once, the fire in her eyes wasn't for him. It was for everyone else. Darius leaned against the post, folding his arms. And then, unexpectedly, he laughed. A low rumble at first before it grew into something freer than he'd felt in weeks. If we don't leave soon, I'm going to end up telling you to roll over. Kale froze, ears perking. Then she gasped, tail shooting high. You wouldn't dare. His grin widened. Oh, I would, she pounced, shoving him with both hands. You vile, shameless man. He stumbled back onto the mat with a grunt, her weight crashing into him. They wrestled, laughing and growling, her claws scraping harmlessly at his shirt as he hooked an arm around her waist and pulled her down. She wriggled, tail thrashing, teeth flashing in mock nips. But he held her fast until both of them were breathless with laughter. Finally, she slumped against him, chest heaving, ears flicking back into a more relaxed tilt. Her voice softened, though the growl lingered. "One day, soldier boy, I'll make good on my promise. Burn it all down." Darius pressed his forehead against hers, his grin easing into something steadier. "I'll bring the torch. But first, we figure out where we're going." Kale sighed, her tail coiling lazily around his leg. "Anywhere but here. Somewhere with shade, with water." He rubbed slow circles across her back, gaze distant. "Somewhere we don't have to bow. Somewhere I don't have to fetch," she added with a smirk. He chuckled. "Yeah, somewhere like that." They lay there in the tense dim glow, still wrapped in each other's arms. For now, their plan was only whispers, their escape, a dream carried on the desert wind. But the bond between them, the laughter, the fire, the promise was already strong enough to pull them beyond the dunes. The days fell into rhythm again. Darius rose with the sun, shoulders straining as he joined the villagers at the well. Rope bit into his palms, water jars weighed down his arms, and each approving nod he earned tasted sour in his mouth. But he endured. Every bucket drawn, every bow offered, it bought them time. When the work was done, he returned to their tent, sweat drying against his skin, muscles heavy. Kale greeted him with a grin sharper than the desert wind, tail swaying as though she carried some delicious secret. "You look half dead," she teased, tugging him down to sit. "Good thing I'm not the idle pet they think I am." Darius raised a brow, skeptical. "Idle? You've been napping while I haul half the desert in jars." She smirked and slipped to the corner of the tent, crouching low. With a dramatic flourish, she tugged open a crate hidden beneath a torn hide. Inside, several cloth bags lay stacked, packed with dried rations, cured strips of meat, and most precious of all, water skins tied shut. Enough for weeks on the road. Darius blinked, stunned. "Kale, where the hell did you?" She flicked her tail, triumphant. "While you've been working like a beast, I've been intercepting the rations before they're counted. They never even notice." His jaw dropped. "You're stealing from under their noses." Her ears flicked mischievously. "Not stealing, borrowing from fools who don't know their pet outsmarts them daily." For a moment, Darius only stared. Then laughter broke from him, raw and warm. He reached out and ruffled her hair, tugging her ears playfully. "You sly fox." Kale giggled, the sound bubbling like cool water. "Oh, the irony," she teased. She crouched low, exaggerating, arms bent like a thief sneaking through shadows. "Sneaky, sneaky." She made a dramatic snatching motion with her claws. Darius sparked a laugh and shoved her over with his leg. She yelled, tail fluffing before bursting into laughter beside him. The desert outside was still cruel, still hostile, but in the low fire light of their tent, there was victory in her grin and relief in his laugh. Together they were no one's beast and no one's master, just two souls plotting their escape, hand in hand. The days in the settlement blurred together, but Darius's resolve only sharpened. Kale's stash of stolen rations grew until their tent seemed to breathe with the secret of it. Yet they both knew food and water alone wouldn't be enough. They needed direction, and direction meant a map. One evening, as the villagers gathered for their monotonous recitations at the circle, Kale slipped from Darius's side with the ease of shadow. Her tail wrapped tight to her body, her steps soft on the sand. She crept into the Elderstone hut. Inside, the walls were lined with old parchments and animal hide scrolls. Symbols carved into clay tablets gleamed faintly in the lamplight. She sniffed the air, ears twitching, before pulling free a folded map tucked beneath an offering bowl. She tucked it under her cloak and darted back into the night. By the time the villagers returned to their fires, Kale was beside Darius again, leaning casually against his shoulder as if she hadn't just robbed the elder blind. That night, by the low fire in their tent, she unfurled the map. Darius's eyes narrowed as he traced the inked paths with his callous fingers. Desert trails, scattered wells, and on the far edge, a marker denoting a docking station. An off-world station, Kale murmured, her golden eyes gleaming. "Ships come and go. If we make it there, Darius exhaled slowly. We're free of this rock. She tilted her head, watching him. Don't know where we'll go after, but anywhere is better than here. Anywhere together, he corrected, firm and certain. Her tail curled around his wrist, squeezing once in silent agreement. The next morning, Darius rose earlier than usual. He walked to the well, shoulders hunched with false weariness. When the elder approached, ready to hand him the rope, Darius shook his head. I need a day, he rasped, voice rough with the fatigue he didn't have to fake. My arms are near useless. Give me 1 day, and I'll haul twice as much tomorrow. The elder studied him for a long moment, then nodded grudgingly. Rest, but tomorrow you work. Darius bowed once. Inside he was already smiling. All day the villagers muttered about his absence from the well, but none challenged him. He was one of their strongest workers, and even the desert gave grudging mercy for labor done well. Back in the tent, he and Kale prepared. They rolled the rations into tight bundles, secured water skins against belts, and folded the map into the inner lining of Darius's vest. Every motion felt like tightening the string of a bow. As the second moon rose and shadows stretched across the sand, they stood at the flap of their tent, rations heavy on their backs, hearts heavier with anticipation. Darius pushed the flap aside and stepped into the cool desert night. Kale followed, ears perked, tails swaying in measured rhythm. Together, they moved quiet as the wind through the outer rings of huts, past the guards half-dozing by their torches. When the village finally vanished behind them, only dunes and stars ahead, Darius lengthened his stride. Sand crunched beneath his boots, his breath steady, his voice carrying back to her with a mischievous edge. Better pick up the pace, pet. Kale's laugh rang clear in the night. You in a hurry for more sand, master? She emphasized the word with dripping sarcasm, ears flicking with playful disdain. Darius grinned, teeth flashing in the moonlight. Well, they're going to be pissed when they realize I cut the ropes to their sacred well. Kale stopped dead, eyes wide. You didn't. He turned to face her, smirking. She burst out, laughing, tail whipping wildly. No way you did that. You're bold, soldier boy. Her cackles echoed across the dunes, bright and unrestrained. Darius couldn't help it. His own laughter broke loose, deep and rough, shaking his shoulders. They had it coming. She doubled over, still laughing, her eyes wet with mirth. Oh, they'll curse your name for years. He shrugged, starting forward again, his hand brushing hers as she caught up. Let them. By the time they notice, we'll be half a desert away. Her grin lingered as she bumped her shoulder against his. You're reckless, and you love it, he shot back. Kale's tail looped around his waist, tugging him close as they walked. Maybe I do. Together, their laughter carried into the night, swallowed by the endless sands. Ahead lay nothing but dunes and stars, and the faint promise of freedom, an unknown future, but theirs to claim. The desert stretched endless, a sea of gold and red under the twin moons. But this time, it did not crush them. The weight of thirst was gone. Kale's stolen water skins sloshed full at their belts. Hunger did not gnaw at them. Rations packed tight, and their bundles kept them strong. For the first time in weeks, they walked with ease, laughter breaking the monotony of sand and silence. Darius walked a few paces ahead, his boots crunching steady against the dunes. He twisted back, grin curling across his face. You know, he called, voice carrying over the hot wind. I'm never letting you live down fetching my water skin. Kales flicked back, her tail bristling in mock outrage. You dare? She hissed dramatically, striding forward to smack his arm with the flat of her claws. I did it once, and now I'll never hear the end of it. He laughed, the sound rolling deep and easy. Saturday fetched Nelt. You were perfect, he smirked. Might even get you a collar next time. Her jaw dropped, golden eyes blazing before she launched herself at him. They tumbled into the sand, rolling down a small slope, his laughter ringing out as she mock-led into his ear. You'd be dead in your sleep, she declared, straddling him in triumph, tail flicking high. He grinned up at her, sand dusting his stubble. Worth it. Her glare broke into a reluctant smile, and she shoved herself off him, brushing grit from her fur. You're impossible. You mean unforgettable. Their banter carried them across the dunes, step after step, until the sand grew firm beneath their feet. Faint tracks appeared, wagon ruts and boot prints leading toward the horizon. The sound reached them before the sight. The low thrum of engines, The metallic groan of machinery, the murmur of voices not beaten down by the desert. The docking station rose out of the dunes like a fortress of steel and stone. Towers bristled with antennae. Lights pulsed red and green across landing pads. Cargo haulers rumbled through the gates, exhaust plumes staining the air. Overhead, ships came and went in constant rhythm, their shadows sweeping across the sand like the wings of birds long extinct. Kale's ears pricked high, her steps quickening. Darius followed, eyes scanning everything. The gates, the guards, the rows of merchants shouting for custom. Inside the station pulsed with life. Dozens of tongues filled the air, barked orders mixing with laughter and curses. Loudspeakers blared over the chaos. A steady stream of destinations rattled out by metallic voices. Transport 714 bound for Harkensbelt. Boarding at Dock 3. Shuttle to Corvus Prime. Now departing Dock 6. Freighter bound for the Alpha's frontier. Dock 2. Kale froze mid-step, ears tilting sharply. Her golden eyes widened, her breath caught. Did you hear that? Darius scanned the crowd. Hear what? Her tail lashed with excitement. Dock 7. She grabbed his arm, claws digging into his sleeve. That ship's bound for Vera. The name was a spark in her throat, a flame she hadn't let herself voice in weeks. Her world, her home, safety, maybe even belonging. Her entire body thrummed with the sound of it, ears trembling, tail coiling tight with anticipation. Darius blinked, the weight of her joy sinking into him. Your home world. She nodded, grinning fiercely. We'd be safe there. They won't chase us into Vera's skies. For the first time since the dunes, her voice carried more than mischief or fury. It carried hope. Darius's brow furrowed. Practical even in the face of her excitement. How the hell are we going to get on that ship? He gestured to the gates, to the guards with scanners, to the stream of passengers clutching their tickets. We don't exactly have boarding passes. Kale's grin sharpened, her tail curling slightly behind her. She leaned closer, her voice low, but electric. Just follow my lead. Her golden eyes gleamed with the same fire that had carried them through the dunes, the same spark that made her bite her tongue for him. Steel rations mocked danger. She was already moving, ears high, tail flicking like a banner of defiance. Darius exhaled, chuckling under his breath as he fell into step beside her. This better be good. Kale smirked over her shoulder. Oh, soldier boy, you have no idea. And together, with weeks of stolen rations strapped to their backs, a map folded safe and a plan whispered only in her grin, they stepped into the chaos of the docking station toward a ship that carried her name and a future they would claim side by side. The docking station's boarding lines moved slow, filled with merchants, workers, and travelers. Darius kept his shoulders squared, eyes roaming over the flow of guards in pale armor, each one armed and scanning papers. Kale walked ahead, tail swaying with unshakable confidence, as if she belonged in every place her feet touched. When they reached the checkpoint, an officer stepped forward, his scaled skin shimmering bronze under the station's lights. His mandibles clicked as he looked Kale over. Purpose of travel? He asked, voice buzzing low through a translation collar. Kale's ears flicked high, and she straightened her back with theatrical grace. I am a Veron high official, she announced, her words rich with practiced authority. Dispatched here to survey this dust-wretched planet. My mission is complete. I now return to Vera. The officer blinked, antennae twitching. His gaze slid from her to Darius, who stood just behind. And this one? Darius's stomach sank. But before he could open his mouth, Kale planted her fists on her hips, golden eyes gleaming with smug mischief. He is my servant. Darius snapped his head toward her, eyes wide. Servant. The officer's eyes narrowed, suspicion sharpening. His scanner beeped as it passed over Darius, green light flickering across his chest. Strange, the officer murmured. For a Veran official, too. Kale cut him off, her tone sharpened to steel. Is there a problem? She asked, __, one ear tilting back in warning. It is Vulpine culture for all Veron officials to be escorted, especially when traveling on distant worlds. She leaned in, her voice dropping low with the sting of challenge. Do you question our culture? The officer stiffened, mandibles clacking in alarm. He quickly stepped back, lowering the scanner. Of course not. No disrespect meant. Please go ahead. Kale gave a sharp nod, then swept past him with regal poise, tail flicking once like a whip. Darius followed, jaw tight to keep the laughter from spilling out too soon. Only when they had passed through the gate, and the officer was well out of earshot, did Darius finally let it loose. A low chuckle escaped. Then a full grin split his face. "Servant," he repeated, shaking his head. "A Vurian official." Kale turned on her heel to walk backward in front of him, grin wicked, eyes sparkling with triumph. "Now it's even. You've been calling me pet for weeks." Darius sparked a laugh, his chest shaking. She cocked an eyebrow, playful and smug. "The rest may have been made up." He groaned, running a hand down his face, but the laughter still spilled out between his words. "You really are something." Kale's smirk softened into a sly smile, her tail curling around his arm as they stepped into the boarding corridor. "And don't you forget it, soldier boy." The hum of engines rose around them as the gate sealed shut, and the future waited on the other side of the airlock. The villagers thought Kale was only a beast. The guards thought Darius was only a servant, but together they defied them all and stepped onto a ship bound for Kale's home world. Their journey is far from over. This was part 4 of their saga. Don't miss the other chapters in the full playlist, and stay tuned for part 5.